I had run Bay 14's health scans for 6 years before I hit a reading I didn't understand, and by then, I trusted the machine more than I trusted most people. So my first thought wasn't that it was wrong. My first thought was that I'd finally broken it. Halveth Anchor wasn't much of a station, a relay point and a cargo scale for 3 trade lanes that didn't quite trust each other, staffed thin, funded thinner, the kind of place a man in his 40s ends up after he's stopped chasing better postings and started valuing the ones where nobody expects much of him. The fluorescent panels buzzed on a maintenance cycle nobody had the parts to fix properly. There was a window at the end of the corridor that caught the system's small yellow sun for about 6 hours a day and made the whole bay feel less like a box in the dark. My scan bay had one working table, a probe cord I retaped every other week because the budget for a new one kept getting pushed to next quarter, and a backlog of mandatory 5-year physicals for long contract laborers who'd rather have gone without. Mara Voss was 5 years and 4 months overdue when station admin finally flagged her file and made it my problem. She came in like she expected to be told she'd done something wrong. Gray work smock, sleeves down past her wrists even in the bay's stale heat, dark hair pulled back tight enough to look like a decision rather than a style. Skin a dusky lavender gray, the kind you saw plenty of on the cargo decks and stopped noticing after the first week. She sat on the edge of the table, like she was ready to leave the second I said she could, hands folded in her lap, eyes tracking every instrument I picked up, the way a person tracks something they've learned not to trust. I'd seen her around the station before, in the way you see the same faces in a small population without ever exchanging more than a nod. Cargo manifests, the mess hall's early shift, once carrying crates down the same corridor I was walking the other direction, quiet, efficient, the sort of worker a supervisor writes reliable, no issues, next to, and never thinks about again. I hadn't thought about her again either, until her name came up red on my overdue list for the 3rd consecutive quarter. Routine, I told her. Blood work, bone density, standard genetic marker panel, 10 minutes, and admin stops sending me your name. She almost smiled at that. Almost. The blood work came back clean. The density scan came back clean. It was the marker panel that stopped me, a partial match, flagged amber, cross-referencing against an archive I didn't know we still carried. I read it twice because the first time didn't make sense, and the second time made less. Extinct lineage, House Van Thess, Kestrane Imperial Registry, match probability 99.6%. I'd heard of the Kestrane, the way you hear about any collapsed empire, a name in a history rotation, a war you weren't alive for, a purge that ended a bloodline 40-some years back, so thoroughly that the registries just marked the whole house extinct and moved on. I looked at the woman on my table, sitting very still, watching my face the way you watch someone reading bad news about you. Machine's acting up, I said, mostly to myself, and ran it again. Same result, same probability, down to the decimal. I could have called it in. Should have, by the book, anomalous genetic match. Station protocol says flag it to the registry office within the hour. I sat there instead, looking at a 5 years overdue physical that had just turned into the kind of thing careers get made or ended over, and I thought about how she'd walked in already braced to be told she'd done something wrong. Your family, I said carefully. You know where they were from? Nowhere anyone asks about twice. Flat, final. The tone of someone who'd built that sentence a long time ago and worn it smooth from use. I'm asking. She looked at the readout instead of me for a while. Then she pulled her sleeve back. First time I'd seen her wrists, and there it was, faint under the lavender gray, a hairline tracery pattern gone almost invisible, with what must have been years of deliberate sun and scarring and plain avoidance. Not decoration. A bloodline mark, the kind every history file on the Kestrane purge mentioned, and none of them showed clearly, because the ones who'd had them hadn't survived to be photographed. I was 6 when the house fell, she said, younger than I could understand what I was losing, old enough that the people who did the falling remembered my face for a long time after. So I stopped having one. Gray smock, dock worker's shoulders, a name I picked off a cargo manifest 20 years ago. It works. It's worked. And the scan just undid 20 years of that in 10 minutes. Looks like it. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands did. A little, on her knees. I want to say I had some plan sitting there, but the truth is, I just knew two things at once: that the readout on my screen was real, and that reporting it up the chain the way protocol wanted would hand a name and a location to whoever, 40 years on, still had reason to finish what the purge started. I'd spent 6 years in that bay, fixing what I could with what the station gave me, and working around the rest. This wasn't so different when I thought about it plainly. Here's what protocol says I do, I told her. Flag it, forward it. Let the registry office decide what happens to you from there. Here's what I'm going to do instead, if you'll let me. I log this scan as inconclusive pending recalibration. Buys us both time to figure out what you actually want done with what's true, instead of what's convenient for somebody's filing schedule. Why would you do that? Because it's your name, not theirs. Seems like you ought to be the one who decides when the world gets to have it back. She was quiet long enough that I thought I'd overstepped. Some stations, that kind of offer gets reported right back to admin, and I'd have deserved whatever came of it. Instead, she just looked at the readout again, like she was seeing it for the first time instead of the second. 40 years, she said. I've been careful for 40 years. I don't know how to stop. Nobody's asking you to stop today. I'm asking if you want the choice to be yours instead of the machine's. I logged it inconclusive. Recalibration pending, standard delay code, the kind of paperwork nobody follows up on unless someone goes looking, and nobody was going to go looking at Halveth Anchor over one overdue physical. It wasn't a solution, it was a door left open instead of one slammed shut in either direction, and that seemed like the most honest thing I had to offer. She came back 3 days later, off shift, sleeves still down but not pulled quite so tight. Said she'd thought about it. Said she wanted the record to say what was true, not broadcast, not filed to the registry with her location attached, but true in the one place it mattered most, which was a sealed personal amendment only she could unlock later, whenever later turned out to mean. You'll help me word it, Ellis, she said. Not quite a question. First time she'd used my name instead of just nodding at my badge. I've got nothing but time and a probe cord held together with tape, I said. I can manage a form. We wrote it together at the end of my shift, the two of us, and a station terminal that had seen better decades, working out language that told the truth, without handing it to anyone who hadn't earned the right to know. When we finished, she rolled her sleeve up the rest of the way for the first time since she'd walked in, and left it up while she read the final line back to herself. Small thing, the kind of thing that doesn't look like much from outside a scan bay. I've thought about it since, how 40 years of a woman making herself gray enough to survive came down, in the end, to somebody willing to run the same scan twice instead of once, and ask a second question instead of filing the first answer. I don't know what she'll do with her name, now that it's hers again to keep or spend. That was never mine to decide. All I did was refuse to be the one who took the choice away from her. She still comes in for her physicals on schedule now, sleeves up. I don't ask about the tracery anymore, and she doesn't hide it. She brings 2 cups of the station's bad coffee some mornings, sets one down on my counter without a word, and stays past the 10 minutes the form calls for. I've stopped correcting the paperwork on that. There are postings a man my age could still chase, better pay, better lanes, and I've quietly stopped applying for any of them. Some recognitions don't need a room full of witnesses. Sometimes it's just one man with a broken cord and a working conscience, choosing to stay exactly where he is, and a woman finally letting herself be seen by exactly one person, on exactly her own terms.